In this episode of Say It Proud, I sit down with Abraham Blue, a college student, podcast host, and future constitutional lawyer to talk about how Gen Z is disrupting traditional systems, creating new pathways for leadership, and boldly answering big questions about vision, identity, and purpose. Abraham is the founder of several leadership initiatives, including the Leaders of Tomorrow program, and he's passionate about helping young people discover their vision, identity, and purpose. In this episode, we talk about what drives Gen Z to stand up, disrupt, and redefine what real leadership looks like. From classrooms to city halls, where we'll hear Abraham's story, his vision for his generation, and why he believes the next wave of change starts with young people daring to ask the right questions. So let's get into it. I'm super excited to have you, Abraham. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Precious, for having me.
Yeah, so just reading over your bio, you're doing all these amazing things. Can you just briefly describe what was your passion on doing the work that you are doing now in your community?
Yeah, so for me, what's pretty much started was the impact that I had from various leaders. You know, I come from humble beginnings and things like that. And I had to first find that drive to want to do everything that I do, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the big things was, of course, my faith in Christianity and God and things like that. And having those personal encounters growing up as a child is what influenced me to want to start leadership initiatives and inspire other young people to seek to be better leaders within the community and also understand their vision, identity, and purpose when it comes to the school, when it comes to what careers they want to go into. So it all started with me. You know, I had challenging backgrounds, and because of that, I've grown to learn and build and things like that, and I wanted to also do that for other young people.
Yeah, so how old are you?
So I'm 19. I'm 19 years old, so yeah, I'm young.
Doing all of this work. Oh my goodness. You know, as being a St. Louis native, what shaped your vision for just the work that you wanted to do?
So, again, you know, I grew up in Clinton Peabody's, and my family was also homeless at some point. So I've experienced, you know, some interesting struggles growing up as a child. And because of those setbacks and, you know, wanting to, grow past my setbacks and my struggles. I grew up as a child having an IEP, being a part of the individual IEP, individual education program. And essentially that program was to help students that needs accommodations, that needs various resources, and I struggle with reading. So because of those different setbacks, I wanted to grow past those things. And I did. I'm a lover reader, you know, now. And I wanted to help other young people that may have had also other struggles. So what I did was in high school as a sophomore, I decided to build a program called LOT. At first, originally, it started as wanting to do a Bible study, but of course, I was inspired by my principal to come up with something that's more universal that can impact all people at the school district. So I decided to do the LOT program, which stands for Leaders of Tomorrow. And from there, and also looking at different leaders without the community, like David Stewart. He's the owner of Worldwide Technologies. Looking at David Bernard. He's a theologian. So looking at different leaders, John Maxwell, he owns a company when it comes to leadership as well. Dr. J. Robert Clinton, he's also wrote many books about the making of a leader. So looking at the playing field around me of the different leaders that were in the community and being inspired by them, I said that other young people can also be inspired by this as well. And I believe that there's a need statistically when it comes to the need of purpose and identity. When I look at statistics concerning how young people in the state that they're in mentally, emotionally, so forth.
You briefly spoke about how you discovered your vision, purpose, and identity.
Yeah.
What advice could you give to any young person who is also trying to seek that same thing?
So when it comes to vision, identity, and purpose, the line goes by this: without the vision, the people perish. Without identity, how do you know who you are? And without purpose, what are you living for? So it's a multifaceted thing. I think that you can find your vision, identity, and purpose when it comes to the career that you're pursuing, and also when it comes to the full totality of who you are as an individual. And I think when it comes to that, it's a process. There's this thing that Dr. J. Robert Clinton wrote in his book called The Making of a Leader. And he talks about these different phases that, you know, leaders go through. And one of those phases is sovereign foundations. And that was one of the things that I've experienced. Is when things are moving and things are at work without you even knowing. And essentially, those are the things that you can't control that is happening within your life. The next phase is the inward growth that I would say personally that I'm in right now. You know, I don't have all the answers. I'm being, you know, developed through different checks in my life. And I think that when we are first able to understand as young people where we are, the season that we're in, the process that we're going through, knowing that we don't have all the answers and that we're going to face certain checks and challenges, I think when we start to reflect on that, we can then understand, okay, I know I want to go here, but I got to first go through this season. I got to first go through this phase. And I got to first allow all these different checks to happen to me so that I can grow as a leader within the community. So I think the first thing is first acknowledging, realizing where you are. The second is asking those questions. What is your worldview? I think that, what do I believe? What do I think? I have this thing that I taught with part of the LOT program, and it was this pyramid. The bottom of it is worldview, the second is belief, and the third is your thoughts and your feelings. And most of the time it's upside down. It's thoughts and feelings, it's beliefs, then worldview, the last thing that we normally think about. But whatever our framework of our worldview is, that can influence everything else when it comes to our beliefs, when it comes to our thoughts, emotions, how we see the world. And I think when more young people are able to ask those further questions and start to have that time to, sit down and really reflect, in the busy world of social media, then they can start leaning into that vision, that identity, and that purpose. So that's what I would say.
I think that is just so powerful within itself. We are now living in a time period where we have to be constantly reminded of our identity and also giving ourselves grace for not always having it together. We're faced with social media, how that became such of a threat to society and just the culture and how much it's changing. I tell people we live in a trend-setting society. There's always something that we're going to wake up and see different. I tell people I can't even keep up with the new slang that's going on. There's always something that I'm like, oh my goodness. So, my next question that I wanted to get into is, you briefly spoken earlier about the LOT program. Is there a student that has been impacted by that?
Of course, yeah. There's some students that I can definitely name that have been impacted by it. So the program started off pretty big, and over time, we had our locked-in leaders that were part of the program. And I've had students come up to me in after graduation, because we do like a graduation thing from the program after they go through a set of courses, and they would come up to me and say, like, Abraham, this is really needed. Like, for example, we had a lesson called emotional intelligence where we allowed some people to come in and talk about emotional intelligence, and they would come to me and be like, man, this has really inspired me. I really feel impacted by these lessons, going through school, doing schoolwork, experiencing the things that I go through at home, and being able to come here after school to be able to have these conversations about leadership, emotional intelligence, how to go through challenging times, mental health. That was a course. They would come up to me and just be like, I think what you're doing is really good, and I can see you going further with this. So I would say a lot of young people were impacted by it that I was close to. They even joined other things that I did, initiatives when it comes to Bible studies. So, and I think that was the heart of it to me, is to actually hear their responses, actually get their feedback. That was a big thing. I tried to lead with service and try to lead with democratically, having a team, hearing their voices when it comes to every step of the way. And I think that's what matters to me the most, is hearing those comments from them.
That is beautiful within itself. I think that, again, just going back to that original point, that I think that it's going to take young people to help young people, if that makes sense. It's going to take relativity and also transparency within each other, because I realized that we're all going through the same thing. It might just be in different increments, but we're all experiencing something different. At the same time, we understand each other. We're dealing with common struggles. We're experiencing the same things in school environment, etc.
I agree. I think young people need an example, because I've been on a podcast before, and this one guy, he was talking to me, and he asked me my testimony, and I started to say that I started to list out the things that I was actually going through. I went through depression. I went through having, crazy thoughts in my mind. I went through, lust and pornography. I've experienced those things, and those were my struggles. And he's like, wow, I never actually met somebody that actually listed out the specific struggles that they've experienced and how they were, how they accomplished to jump over those hurdles. And some people of the older generation that I've talked to, I've always had the rustle of actually hearing it. I know that you say you went through something and now you've made it to this point, but it's like, what was that thing? Like, what was that thing that you went through? And for me, I like to put myself out there. And I think that one of the big things as a leader is that you have to put yourself out there. You have to be able to, they won't be able to connect with you if you don't put yourself out there and say, hey, this is what I went through. I'm the same as you. Only difference is that I'm choosing to reflect on that and build forward. And I think that more young people need those examples. They need more people to be vocal in that way.
Yeah, speaking about disrupting change and as being a generational Z disruptor, what systems do you think need disrupting the most right now, and how can young people help lead that change?
Disrupting. So I would say, when I think of the different systems that needs to be disrupted, I'm trying to see how that correlates when it comes to leadership. I would say ability to be open. I would say with and transparent. With ourselves and where we are. I think that a lot of times most young people, we're always wanting to get the cheese in the sense where we always want to be in the position to make change rather than, disrupting and saying, hey, no, there's a process to get there. So for me, one of the big things I believe that needs to be disrupted is understanding that, there is a process in that there's things that needs to be addressed, first, which is, of course, mental health, things like that. And the leaders that we do have that are ready for that, they need to disrupt the spaces to speak up and say, okay, I don't want to just be a part of a program, but I actually want to make change happen.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes I found myself being connected to different groups or associating myself with different programs. And I've always reflected after doing the work, okay, what did I actually do? Did I actually change anything?
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of adults out there that want, of course, young leaders to use their voices, to be involved. But at times, when you are in those spaces, you wonder, okay, are you actually able to do the thing? Or is this just, a check off to be in a certain space? So for me, my big thing is just not getting the opportunity to be in a space and just to be involved, but to actually feel like you're doing the change, actually allowing the leaders to lead, and the leaders that are out there, figuring out ways to help them get seen, because there's a lot of leaders that are out there, but not a lot of them are being seen. So I think that needs to be disrupted, if I was to say, is the disruption of, of moving forward, of, trying to find those resources, of being able to actually do the thing, just not be a part of something just because by name, but actually by character, actually by change. So I guess that's the best way I can answer that question for right now.
Yeah, you just made me think about something that really stuck out to me. I think for me, it would be more about how a lot of older generations underestimate Gen Z. I've been in a few rooms where a lot of just older generations will say, I just want to pass down the torch. I'm like, no, not necessarily pass it down, but let's do this work together, because I think that mutually we both can benefit from each other. You have an experience where I haven't experienced yet because of the experiences that I have not yet to experience. And then also as Gen Z, I coming from a fresh experience or something that I have not actually took into account. So I think that just on both ends, like, we can work together. And also I want like a lot of just adults to know that Gen Z, we are the future leaders, we are the future change makers. And I think that just taking away from that and knowing that we need to work together and come in solidarity, it's just most imperative in the moment that we are living in. And what is the biggest lesson, I would say, that you learned so far as being a leader?
One of the biggest lessons that I learned is, I've always heard this, fall forward. I led an initiative when I was in high school, and it's called the MYLC conference, and I really pushed it. I had a vision when I was as a sophomore to want to inspire leaders and bring different people together, things like that. And I had a whole thing laid out, of course, and I was thankful for all the people that supported me to be able to bring that together. But from that experience, though I didn't see, the students that are like the impact that I had envisioned, I understood that there's a process.
Yes.
There's a process to things, and you may not see the full vision of what you want right then and there, but as long as you acknowledge what you did have and the progress that you did see and the work that you did do to at least get to that place, even though it's not the full picture, you can build on that. And I think that was probably one of the biggest lessons that I guess I learned, is falling forward and being vulnerable as well, being vulnerable about where you are. I think one of the biggest things as a leader that we miss is that we're so focused on being the leader rather than being developed to be the leader, that we want to be. So I think it's important for us to realize that the making of a leader is more important than actually the position, because there's a lot of people in positions, but are not leaders. And I think that is what's important. Is, a leader you're not defined by the position, you're defined by the character. So for me, I think that one of the biggest things that I've learned has been falling forward and reflecting on the fact that my character is what matters more than anything.
Yeah, that takes me to that saying, what power does knowledge have if you don't apply it? And you having your own podcast show, you're speaking right from authenticity. Can you tell me, how did that start?
So the podcast really started when I was in a little bit when I was in high school as well. Again, the LOT podcast, we had our own podcast where we talked to various leaders, Mayor Jones, Mayor Knapper. We talked to our superintendent, her name, Dr. Jameson, and we went to these different leaders in the community, and I was able to talk to them and hear what they had to say and about their field of work and how they navigated their endeavors. And that kind of inspired me to start my own podcast to touch on issues that I think that were important. One of the issues was the fatherless issue within our country. I think that there are some things that were involving that I definitely wanted to leverage, that I think that was a problem. We need more, fathers and in the home and things like that. So for me, it was my belief, again, my belief in God, my faith, but also the things that I believed that was important, which was leadership, and things concerning Black America, and ultimately leadership. So yeah, that was my reason.
Yeah, as I get into like my quick fire round segment, I always want to make sure that I'm just like throwing in some questions that could be really quick, just to get some more fun facts about you. Okay. I wanted to lastly ask you, what advice would you give to a young listener who wants to be a generational disruptor but doesn't know where to exactly start?
I would say to understand the mediator. The mediator is the seeking your vision, identity, and purpose, understanding what you believe and why you believe it, being the bridge between the experiences and the struggles that you have to understanding the vision, identity, and purpose, which will help you become the leader and the disruptor that you are called to be.
Got it. Okay. Oh my goodness. So I want to ask you some quick questions. My first question is, what is your favorite book that you're reading right now? Well,
that's a good question. My favorite book, the most recent book that I've came across is, 52 Lessons of the Good Book, but there's a new version of it, The Good Book by David Stewart, that he recently remade. It will be that, 52 Lessons of the Good Book.
Okay, one word that can describe Gen Z.
One word, destiny. I would say.
One thing you cannot live without.
I can't live without the Bible. I gotta have the word.
No, that is actually good. Also, I want to ask you, what is your dream vacation?
My dream vacation, again, I keep thinking spiritual heaven. But anyway, if I had to think on earth, I would say my dream vacation would be Africa. Somewhere in Africa, Ghana.
Yeah, Africa's amazing. I went to Senegal last year. You will love it. Yeah, so I also wanted to, before I end, you do have a book coming out?
Yes, I do. Okay. So I have a book that's coming out, which is called VIP in the 21st Century, Vision, Identity, and Purpose. It's a memoir of my life, and it pretty much focuses on, again, the different experiences that I went through and how young people can find their VIP, and through that process, they must do Project GPS, and it's a lot that, that involves the book that I think that will inspire young people a lot.
Amazing. And quickly, could you add where people can follow you or just stay connected with you?
Yes, of course. So you can follow me on Instagram at Abraham Blue, but Abraham _ Blue. You can also follow me on Facebook. Again, just look up Abraham Blue. And I also have a YouTube channel called The Abraham Blue Show as well, so they can also look at my YouTube channel.
Yeah, well, we thank you for coming on Beat District Radio. This is such an amazing episode. Thank you for being the first guest. Again, thank you for all the work that you are doing. We know that you're going to continue to do the necessary work in our community and bridging that gap between Gen Z and leadership. So continue to shine. You are amazing. We appreciate you. And thank you for coming on Beat District Radio.
Thank you, Precious, for having me.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.